Hey, greetings everybody. This your girl Tiffany. I'm here live in effect. And tonight we're going to be going into the connection of the Caribbeans, African Americans, and Afro Latinos. So I'm just going to present the sources today that's going to show the genetic connection between these three areas of the diaspora. All right. So make sure you like and subscribe and hit the notification bell and share the channel. Make sure I turn my microphone though, because I want y'all to be able to hear me. Right? I'll be able to hear me. All right, peace to the chat. So unfortunately, I was not able to do a video with a guest today. So that video that I was going to do about the foundational African American has been postponed to the next following week. All right. So let's start looking at what is the African diaspora, right? So let's start on the Wikipedia source. Going down, it says the African diaspora is the worldwide collection of community descended from people from Africa, right? The term mostly common refers to the descendant of the native West and Central Africans who were enslaved and shipped to the Americas via the Atlantic slave trade between the 16th and the 19th centuries, with their largest population in the United States, Brazil, Colombia, and Haiti. The term can also be used to refer to the African descendant who immigrated to other parts of the world. Scholars identify four celebratory phases of this migration out of Africa. All right, so as you can see, here's the numbers and the list of countries. So let's go down. All right, it says many Africans dispersed throughout North America, South America, Europe, and Asia during the Atlantic, Trans-Saharan, Red Sea, and Indian Ocean slave trade, right? So the earliest recorded evidence of Africans as slaves outside of Africa comes from the ancient Greece and Rome. So in the Greco-Roman world, almost all native Africans were known primarily as Ethiopian, right? And then if we go further down, it says, oh, at the beginning of the 8th century, Arabs took African slaves from the central and eastern portion of the African continent, where they were known as the Zanj, and sold them into markets in the Middle East, the Indian subcontinent, and the Far East for slavery in Umayyad Caliphate and Abbasid Caliphate and Mamluk Sultanate and the Ottoman Empire. Beginning in the early 15th century, Europeans captured or bought African slaves from West Africa and brought them first to Europe, and then after the start of European colonization there in the late 15th century to the Americas, the transatlantic slave trade ended in the 19th century. The dispersal through slave trading represent the largest forced migration in human history. The economic effect on the African continent proved devastating as generations of young people were taken from their communities and societies and di- were disrupted. Some communities formed by descendants of African slaves in Americas, Europe, and Asia have survived to the present day. In other cases, native ethnic groups of Africans intermarried with non-native Africans and their descendants blended into the local population. All right. So if we go down, it says in the Americas, the confluence of multiple ethnic groups from around the world contribute to the multi-ethnic society. In Central and South America, most people are descended from European, Native American, African ancestry. In 1880, in 1888, in Brazil, nearly half the population descended from African slaves. The variation of physical characteristics extended across a broad range. In the United States, there was historically a greater European colonial population in relation to African slaves, especially in Northern Tier. There was considerable racial intermarriage in colonial Virginia and other forms of racial mixing during the slavery and post Civil War years. Jim Crow and anti miscegenation laws passed after the 1863 to 1877 Reconstruction era in the South in the late 19th century, plus waves of vastly increased immigration from Europe in the 19th and 20th century, maintained much distinction between racial groups. And in the early 20th century, to institutionalize racial segregation, most southern states adopted the one drop rule, which defined and recorded anyone with any discernible African ancestry as black, even those of obvious majority Native European or of majority Native American ancestry. One of the results of this implementation was the loss of records of Native identified groups who were classified as black because of being mixed race. All right, so there's one source you can find about the African diaspora, right? So let's take it to the next source. This one comes from the AAIHS website. It's called Black Perspective, located and connecting Latin America and the African diaspora. Let's see. Let's go into. Okay, well, the genetic ancestry of African Americans, Latino, European Americans across the United States. All right. So this comes from Science Direct. All right, so let's go. So All right, so let's go over here where it says the genetic landscape of the U.S. It says pattern of genetic ancestry of self-reported African Americans genome-wide ancestral estimate of African Americans showing average proportion of 73.2% African, 24.0% European, and 0.8% Native American ancestry. Okay, so we find systemic differences across states in the U.S. in mean ancestry proportion of self-reported African Americans. On average, the highest level of African ancestry are found in African Americans living in or born in the South, especially South Carolina and Georgia. It says we found lower proportion of African ancestry in the Northeast, the Midwest, the Pacific Northwest, and California. The amount of Native American ancestry estimated for African Americans also vary across states. In the U.S., more than 5% of African Americans are estimated to carry at least 2% of Native American ancestry genome. African American in the West and Southwest, on average, carry higher levels of Native American ancestry, a trend that is largely driven by individuals with less than 2% Native American ancestry. With a lower threshold of 1% Native American ancestry, we estimate that about 22% of African Americans carry some Native American ancestry, right? And so let's see, where else can we go find some more information? All right, so let's go to the intro of this article. So right at the intro, it says over the last several hundred years, the United States has been the site of ongoing missing of people of continental population that were previously separated by geography. Native Americans, European immigrants to the Americas, and Africans brought to the New World largely via the transatlantic slave trade come together in the New World. Mating between individuals with different continental origin, which we refer to as population admixture, right, result in individuals who carry DNA inherited from multiple populations. Although U.S. government census survey and other studies of household in the U.S. have estimated fine scale of self-described ethnicity at the state and county level. The relationship between genetic ancestry and self-reported ancestry for each region has not been deeply characterized. Understanding genetic ancestry of individuals from a self-reported population and differences in ancestry patterns among regions can inform medical studies and personalized medical treatment. The genetic ancestry of individuals can also shed light on the history of admixture and migration within different regions of the U.S., which is of interest to historians and sociologists. So, previous studies have shown that African Americans in the U.S. typically carry a segment of DNA shaped by contribution from peoples of Europe, Africa, and the Americas, with variation in African and European admixture proportion across individuals and differences in groups across parts of the country. More recent studies that utilize high density genotype data provide reliable individual ancestry estimates illustrate the largely variability in African and European ancestry proportion at a individual level and are able to detect low proportion of Native American ancestry. Latinos across the Americas have differing proportion of Native American, African, and European genetic ancestry shaped by local historical interaction with migrants brought by the slave trade, European settlement, and indigenous Native American population. Pay attention to this. Latinos across the Americas have differing proportion of Native American, African, European genetic ancestry shaped by the local historical interaction with migrants brought by the slave trade, European settlement, and indigenous Native American population. All right. Then it goes on to say Individuals from the countries across South America, the Caribbean, and Mexico have different profiles of genetic molded by each population unique history and interaction with local native people population. European Americans are often used as a proxy for Europeans in genetic studies. European Americans, however, have a history of admission of many genetically distinct European populations. Studies have shown that European Americans also have non-European ancestry, including African, Native American, and Asian, though it has been poorly quantified with some discordance among estimates even within studies. All right. So with this article, okay, it shows the genetic relationship that African American, Latinos, even European American have. All right. So this article came out on January the 8th of 2015. And watch this. It says validation of non-European ancestry in African Americans and European Americans, right? So it goes into details of, as a matter of fact, let me go back up real quick. Hmm. All right. Well, let me start where it says ancestry analysis. So ancestry composition. It says 23andMe's ancestry composition method provides estimate of ancestry proportion for several worldwide population at each window of the genome. To estimate genome-wide ancestry proportion of European, African, and Native American ancestry, we aggregate over population to estimate the total likelihood of each population, and with a majority threshold of 0.51. If any window has a majority of a continental ancestry, we include it in the calculation of genome-wide ancestry, which is estimate as the number of windows passing the threshold for each ancestry over the total number of windows. Some windows might not pass our threshold for any population, so they remain unassigned, making it possible for estimates for all ancestry to not sum the 100% result, resulting in population average that likewise might not sum to 100%. So listen, it says we allow for this unspecific ancestry to reduce the error rates of our assignment. So in some sense, our estimate might be viewed as lower bounds on ancestry, and it is possible that individuals carry more ancestry than estimated. In practice, we typically assign nearly all windows with an average of about 1 to 2% unassigned ancestry. So we do not expect it to affect our results, with the exception of Native American ancestry, which we discussed below. All right, so it pretty much shows you how genetic works as far as like doing the research on your genetic ancestry, right? Okay. So going back, you're not 100% anything. All right. So you have some form of admixture in you, but you may have a higher number of admixture of this ethnic group versus the other ethnic group. So many of people walk around saying that they are Native Americans, right? They call themselves Black indigenous people. But you don't have on average, the average African American does not have a higher number of Native American in them. At the most, they would have maybe about 2 to 3% of Native American. But the highest number you're going to have is your African ancestry and European ancestry. That's what you're going to have. The highest number you're going to have is your African ancestry and European ancestry. right? And so with the Afro Latinos, they may carry a high number of Native American in them, all right, or the indigenous ancestry because of the region their bloodline come from, right? But they carry a higher number of African ancestry and also some Europeans. Same with the Caribbean, higher number of African ancestry, right? With some European ancestry and maybe some indigenous ancestry. So the connection is the transatlantic slave trade. And as I go on in this article, all right, so it says low estimate of African ancestry in 23 million African Americans, unlike previous estimate of the mean proportion of African ancestry, which typically have a range from 70% to 93% African ancestry. Our estimate, depending on the exclusion, are 73 to 75%. Okay. Then when we go over here, it said to quantify the difference in African ancestry driving mean state differences, we examined the distribution of estimate of African ancestry and African Americans from District of Columbia and Georgia, which have at least 50 individuals with the lowest and highest mean of African ancestry proportion. All right. So we find a the qualitative shift in the two distribution of African ancestry, with DC showing a reduced mode, higher variance, and heavier lower tail of African ancestry corresponding to more African Americans with low below average ancestry than Georgia. The qualitative differences in the distribution of African ancestry proportion in African Americans from states with higher and lower mean ancestry appears to be driven by both a shift in the mode of the distribution as well as a heavier left tail reflection, more individuals with a minority of African ancestry. We posit that differences among states could be due to differences in admixture, differences in self identity, or differences in patterns or assortative matings, whereby individuals with similar ancestry might preferentially mate. For example, greater levels of admixture with Europeans would both shift the mode and result in more African American individuals who have a minority of African ancestry. Alternatively, a shift towards African American self identity for individuals with a minority of European ancestry, possibly because of changing in cultural or social force, would likewise result in lower estimate of mean African ancestry. Lastly, assortative mating would work to maintain or increase the variance in ancestry proportion, though assortative mating alone could not shift the mean proportion of African ancestry in a population. All right. So, what that article is saying is basically telling you that depends on what state and location, right? There's a variation of those who have a certain percentage of African ancestry. So you may have those who have like maybe 90% of African in them, right? Where you may have those who have 83% of African in them. And then you have those who may have like 70% of African. All right. Depends on where their location is at. So, and if you notice in the article, it spoke about Georgia and South Carolina because those states, right, have a very, very strong African population. States like Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, right? There's a very strong African ancestry. There's a very strong African genetic. All right. And then in those states, there's more black people that's more than likely going to mate with other black people, right? To have a stronger African gene. So, but if you go to other places, right, they may not have such a high concentration of African ancestry. Does not mean that they're not African descended, but the number is just not as high compared to those who are in the southwest or southeastern part of the United States. All right. So let's go into the next article. All right. So it says African Americans and Black Caribbean feelings of closeness to Africans. All right, so let's go ahead. Abstract. African Americans and Black Caribbean relation dominate research on interaction across Black ethnic divides. Using National Survey of American Life data, we explore a different aspect of Black interethnic attitudes, how close these groups feel towards Africans. African Americans and Black Caribbeans were largely similar in their feelings of closeness to Africans. For Black Caribbeans, younger and male respondents, those reporting higher levels of financial strain living in the Northeast, and persons who immigrated to the United States at least 11 years ago, reported feeling especially close to Africans. Being male was the only significant correlate among African Americans. The findings are discussed in relation to how race, ethnicity, and national origin shape personal identities within the United States and their significance for intergroup perception. These broader issues warrant further consideration in light of assertion that race as a defining feature of American life and intergroup relation is obsolete. All right. So it says social scientists recognize that group identity facilitates political solidarity among African Americans that provide critical insight to the potential for social mobility and racial mobilization efforts. Even so, an increasing diasporic flow of immigrants from the Caribbean and Africa to the U.S. highlights important differences that impact how Black groups navigate America's system of racial stratification. Given that social sciences tend to view Black identity as a product of assignment, there has been minimal exploration of what Blackness means for different segments of the Black population. The majority of research examined the interaction between Black Caribbean immigrants and native-born Blacks in the United States indicates the former oblivious or abliviant was yet oblivious about their American racialized identities, as well as the depiction of Black immigrants as a model minority to which African Americans should aspire. Emerging work suggests that Black people, born native born and immigrant, encounters with racial discrimination serve to destabilize purported ethnic cleavage and reinforce feelings of commonality across groups. Black immigrants and African Americans, while distinct in several ways, share important similarity. Race, in particular, plays a fundamental role in shaping life experiences for all Black groups and bond them in common cause. All right, increasing ethnic diversity within Black America complicates what Blackness and race means, creating new forms of identity with the potential to challenge racial hierarchies based on being Black or immigrant status and segment assimilation success stories. This multidimensional aspect of experiences is absent from much of the empirical attention on how varying Black cultures, histories, and needs produce an ethnically diverse people. A more sensitive examination of Black American life experiences has practical implication for current policy and pragmatic formulation that acknowledge interracial while simultaneously ignoring the intra-racial differences. right? Not interracial and intraracial. So intraracial means, black people, but there's differences in cultural practices, right? And they come from different parts of the region, but they're still black. And interracial means you got black and those who may be Hispanic and those who may be Asian, those who might be European. All right. So importantly, this work suggests the needs to explore the ways in which ethnicity complicates blackness and feeling of closeness to members of the African diaspora. The present study explores African Americans and Black Caribbeans' attitudes towards African nationals using data from the National Survey of American Life. I think I read. Yeah. Research on racial and ethnic identities and intra-group interaction and feelings among African Americans and Black Caribbeans in the United States describe the dynamic and complex personal and situational processes which whereby racial and ethnic identities are constructed. Using this information as a background, we describe differences in how racial identities are developed for African Americans and Black Caribbeans, as well as their potential importance for identification with the African diaspora and attitude towards African nationals. The literature review began with a discussion of racial and ethnic identities for Black Caribbeans and African Americans within the U.S. The literature then examined research on African Americans and Black Caribbeans' reported feelings of closeness to various race and ethnic groups with a discussion of major demographic and social correlates. All right, so watch this. Black and ethnic identities. A common assumption of work on the African diaspora in the U.S. is that racial identity produces feeling of closeness to other groups, which are construed as dichotomous and mutually exclusive. For example, the literature on relation between Black Caribbeans and African Americans accepted that Black Caribbeans acclimation to the United States is hindered by strong national or ethnic identities. Further distinction between Black Caribbean nationals and ethnic identities differential preferences for national versus racial identity among Black Caribbeans. And racial identities of U.S. born African American are viewed as deterrents to developing racial solidarity and feeling of mutual closeness. Moreover, social class differences may provide affluent Black immigrants opportunity to transcend racial classification. However, despite ethnic, cultural, and historical diversity, immigrants are regarded as Black in the United States. So Black Caribbeans often arrive with substantial social capital, which advantages them over other native Blacks in terms of material resources. Given their superior economic circumstances, Black Caribbean are depicted as a model minority, which are differently assimilated due to their elevated minority status. In response, many Black Caribbean emphasize cultural cues that distinguish them from native-born Blacks, right? Given the dynamic nature of the social process that produce race and ethnicity, we argue that racial and ethnic boundaries are fluid, with both race and ethnicity playing divergent concomitant roles in intra-group relationships. All right. So let's go down where it says the feeling of closeness. Research on the intergroup relation identifies in group attachment and references over out groups as a general principle. Related to this, attitudes such as in-group favoritism engender greater levels of trust, positive perception, and more cooperative behavior. So alternatively, distinction are sufficient to activate disparate re- reaction to others. Despite this, intergroup bias is not inevitably linked to disdain for outgroups in all circumstances, nor is it associated with intergroup hostility, suggesting the need for a more nuanced approach to assessing in-group outgroup perception. And it says sociological research recognizes that racial and ethnic identity can be conceptualized as feeling of closeness towards individuals or group who share a common ideology, feeling, thoughts, or racial ethnic symmetry. All right. So racial identity, like other social identity, is multidimensional, involved in awareness of belonging to a social category or group, along with the value and emotional significance attached to that membership. Racial identity is thought to protect mental health by boosting psychosocial resources and enhancing self-esteem and mastery by connecting people to other via meaningful social roles in their families and communities. So the concept of perceived closeness is used to estimate how similar respondents view themselves in relation to their own group and in relation to different racial and slash ethnic groups. So the construct of closeness is commonly used as an indication of in-group bias in research exploring Black racial attitudes. Perceived closeness or one's psychological attachment or identification with a particular social group is used to assess interracial attitudes and clarify the relationship between racial identity and outgroup attitudes. This approach assumes that individuals can express positive attitudes across ethnic boundaries, despite the fact that their self concept and identity is based in their primary social relationship to their own in group. All right. So it says a small body of research in areas of racial identity and in-group, out-group attitudes based mostly on African American provide information on possible correlation of perceived closeness to African nationals. Among African Americans, age and gender have the most consistent relationship with closeness to other target population. All right. Research used the National Survey of Black Americans found that both older persons and men felt closer to Africans than their younger and female counterparts. So gender and age were similarly associated with African American feeling closeness to blacks in the United States. In contrast, there are few income, education, or marital status differences in African American perception of other groups. Black Caribbeans similarly demonstrate only a few age, gender and marital status and social economic status differences in perceived closeness to group. However, persons from Jamaica, as compared to those from Trinidad Tobago and first generation Black Caribbean compared to those born in the US, report being closer to other Black Caribbeans, right? Region also region is also a significant correlate of perceived closeness to in groups and out groups. African Americans in the Northeast compared to those in the South report closer feelings to the West Indians, Hispanic, and Asian Americans, but not African national. While Black Caribbeans in the Northeast compared to the other region of the U.S. were closer to Blacks from the Caribbean. According to age, gender, and region may be important for African Americans, while country of origin, right, for example, Jamaica and immigrant generation, first generation may emerge as correlates of felt closeness to Africans for Black Caribbeans. And finally, we expect that reported discrimination and financial strain will positively associate with closeness to other groups. African American and Black Caribbeans who have experienced high levels of discrimination and or have had more financial difficulty may report greater feelings of closeness with other groups, especially other marginalized population. With regards to discrimination, being mistreated is believed to create a common experience which is linked to a perceived common identity. As Black Caribbeans encounter discrimination in the United States, they become more aware of the importance of race, which leads to feeling closer towards similar racial groups. This consistent with previous research among Black Caribbeans in which discrimination was positively associated with the feelings of closeness to Blacks from the Caribbean. Similarly, African Americans and Black Caribbeans who have experienced financial difficulty may have more tolerance for other Black marginalized population. This is consistent with previous research on African Americans, which found that characterizing the economic circumstances of African Americans as severe was associated with feeling closer to West Indians. All right, so in this article, as you can see, it shows that there is the relationship between African American and Afro Caribbean feeling close to those in the African, those who come from the African countries, and um feeling close to other black people that come, they are immigrants. Like you have now, yes, it is true that you have black Caribbeans that may feel closer to other black Caribbeans, right? And African Americans may feel closer to those that come from the Caribbean islands, or those who are African nationals, right? Okay. But you also see that there is the commonality. They both recognize that yes, they have art against themselves when it comes to being in the American society, being black, and trying to persevere in a land like America, right? They know that there are odds against them. They know that they're going to deal with some form of racial discrimination or whatnot. So they do acknowledge those challenges. But then, there is some difference, and there's some differences as far as like, how there might be perceived attitude towards one another. Let's get into this next article here. Mhm. All right, so African diaspora in the Americas, the Caribbean, resistant culture and survival, right? So there is various books that you can find. All right, so here is the archaeology of the Atlantic Africa and the African diaspora. Let's see, who's the author of this book? Okay, and then you have the changes, the changing worlds of Africa. I mean, Atlantic Africa essays in honor of Robin Law. Lose Your Mother, a journey along the Atlantic slave route. An African Republic, Black and White Virginians in the Making of Liberia. Afro Caribbean diaspora in the Atlantic world. The transatlantic dimension of ethnicity in the African diaspora. The travels in the West, Cuba with notice of Puerto Rico and the slave trade. All right. So that website gives you sources. So let's see what other information can be found regarding to the connection between the Caribbeans and African Americans. All right, I'm back. Peace to everybody in the chat. Shout out to everybody in the chat. Thank y'all for coming through. All right, so what is the concept of the diaspora? Now, this comes from wearecasa.org. A celebration of Black diaspora. So, a celebration of Black heritage diaspora in the Latin America and the Caribbean. And it says in the Caribbean and Latin America, right, the concept of diaspora refers to the dispersion of people in African descent who was forcefully brought to South America, the Caribbean, Spain, Italy, and the United States during the transatlantic slave trade. This diaspora has resulted in vibrant Afro Caribbean and Afro Latino American communities, contributing significantly to the region cultural diversity. So, the majority of their ancestors originated from West Africa, particularly regions such as Senegambia, Guinea Coast, and the Central West Coast, where enslaved individuals were taken from diverse ethnic and cultural backgrounds. So the modern African diaspora in the Caribbean and Latin America is spreading across various countries and regions in these areas. Countries with significant Afro-Caribbean, Latin American population include the Jamaican, Haiti, Cuba, Trinidad and Tobago, right? Brazil, Colombia, Dominican Republic, Venezuela, and Mexico. Okay. All right. So that's that source of information. Let's see what else we can find. So it's called The Genetic Consequences of the Transatlantic Slave Trade in the Americas. Going down to the introduction. And you can see the name of the website right here. Hub Medical Central, National Library of Medicine, National Center for Biotechnology Information, right? The forced displacement of more than 12.5 million men, women, and children from Africa to the Americas between 1515 and 1865 has had a significant social, cultural, health, and genetic impacts across the Americas. The consequences of this displacement are myriad and complex, reflecting the varied economic goals and practices of the nation outfitting the ships that transported captive Africans. The current narrative of this era of forced deportation has been compiled from thousands of historical shipping documents, as well as diaries, personal letters, sketches, and records of slave sales. These data suggest the number of enslaved people disembarking at each port in the Americas. The nation that shipped enslaved people to a given port and the population and geographic location in Africa from which captives were taken differs from region to region within the Americas. For example, shipping manifests indicate that the number of enslaved people disembarking at Brazilian and Caribbean ports was far greater than the number disembarking at other ports in the Americas. An estimate of 10.1 million enslaved people, primarily male, disembarked in Central America, South America, and the Caribbean, accounted for more than 90% of all captives were brought to the Americas, with fewer than half a million disembarking in mainland North America, 3 to 5% of the total. Concurrent with transatlantic voyage, slave trade also transferred nearly 500,000 enslaved people throughout the Americas, with most documented intra-American voyage originating in the Caribbean. Despite a majority of enslaved Africans disembarking into Latin America, estimates of the portion or proportion of African ancestry for Latin Americans with African roots are lower on average than estimate for African Americans in the United States. Further, patterns of embarkation of enslaved population vary over time, whereby people primarily from 48 distinct ethno-linguistic groups were targeted across Atlantic Africa. Prior to 1650, slave voyages most often originated in Senegambia and West Central Africa, in location now known as the Democratic Republic of Congo and Angola, although West Central Africa remained a primary embarkation region throughout the slave trading period from 1650 to 1850. These voyages originated with increasing frequency at ports in the Bight of Benin and the Bight of Biafra, in location now known as Benin, Nigeria, Cameroon, and Gabon. While records have shed light on the main trends of the transatlantic slave trade, the effects of underdocumented practices such as illegal slave trading and details of events after disembarkation in the Americas remain less understood. If underdocumented events did not shift the overall paradigm of the slave trade and reproduction rates were equivalent among enslaved population in the Americas, the degree of genetic similarity between the Americas and each slave trading region of Africa would be expected to be correlated with the recorded number of enslaved people that disembarked into each region. Also, little is known about the extent to which enslaved people and their descendants continue to associate exclusively with those of similar ethno-linguistic origins after generations in the Americas. If such association was common, Americans with African roots would be expected to have African ancestry from a single region of Africa in a pattern that is correlated with geography. Finally, previous studies indicate that individuals with mixed ancestry have higher levels of African ancestry in genomic regions inherited through the female line. However, the extent of this sex bias and gene pool contribution may vary across the Americas due to regional differences in morality of enslaved men, rape of enslaved African women, forced segregation, and practices of reducing African representation by promoting reproduction with Europeans. And it says previous genetic studies focusing on people of African descent across the Americas found that most African Americans in the United States have more African ancestry from population that live near present day Nigeria than from population that lived elsewhere in Atlantic Africa. However, multiple previous studies have lacked representation of West Central Africa, the largest source of enslaved people during the transatlantic slave trade, leading to an incomplete understanding of the dynamics of population interaction. During and after the slave trade, here we combine genetic data from individuals representing the majority slave trading regions of Atlantic Africa, Europe, and the Americas, and explore concordance with centuries of historical documents. We determine ancestral connection using identity by descent, local ancestry inference, and was it Bayesian dating techniques. In addition, we use ancestral admixture models to estimate the bias in gene pool contribution of African, European, and indigenous American men and women to current population of the Americas. So it goes in to talk about, the amount of people they had to use for the research on this project. So it says human subject. All right, we include data from participants drawn from the millions of research participants of 23andMe, a consumer personal genetic companies, the 1,000 genome projects, etc. All right, so before I continue on, I would just want to say something to you individuals out there. For those of you who think DNA genetics is fake, Do you have any scientific evidence and research to validate those claims? Have you done that scientific research to validate that genetics testing or DNA testing is fake? If not, then you really don't have a position to really speak on it. So if unless you done did the scientific research, right, to study about the genetics testings and how these things work, right? If you have that information to prove that it's not sufficient or insufficient, then you need to be able to present that. Otherwise, you're just giving an opinion. And your opinion is not going to support the scientific knowledge that is available. It's just merely your opinion, which you're entitled to. Peace, Jason. How you doing? Thank you for coming through. So let's go back to the article. Now it says the Human Genome Diversity Project, right, Angola and previous studies of the Democratic Republic of Congo, Sierra Leone, San speaking people, Angolan participants' saliva sample were collected with the research consent, which was approved by both the ethic committees of the University of November 11, right, and the University of Leicester, is it Leicester Ethic Committee. 23andMe research participant provided informed consent, participated in the research online under a protocol approved by the external AAHRPP accredited IRB, right? So let's go. So it says we group individuals across the Americas, the Atlantic, Africa, and Western Europe into cohorts designed to reflect historical region. Within the United States, we focus solely on the coastal and surrounding states known to have been disembarkation location for enslaved people, right? So we include the Cape Verde archi- archipelago as control region since it is an Atlantic African country that was colonized by the Portuguese in the 15th century and has been inhabited primarily by the descendants of enslaved people from Senegambia. So in Africa, we merged contemporary administrative borders to match all major slave trading regions during the transatlantic slave trade, except for Southeast Africa, which constituted about 3.8% of all African embarkments due to limited sample representation in Mozambique and Madagascar. Because records constitute members of capital deported by region of purchase as opposed to the ethno-linguistic affiliation, right? Merging geographic boundaries in this manner allow us to connect people of African descent directly to slave trading regions from which their African ancestors may have embarked. So for those of you that's wondering what the word embark means, that means they have been located in. So embark means to be located in, right? Oh, hold on. Excuse me. The word embark means to be taken, to go out, right? Disembark means to be located in. All right. So disembark means to go in, embarkation means to leave out. All right. So borders of Atlantic African countries generally align with those historical slave trading regions. However, we split Nigeria into western and eastern states along the Niger River because enslaved people from east of Niger were deported from ports in the Bight of Biafra, whereas people of West Niger were deported from ports of the Bight of Benin. Categorizing Nigeria in this way also corresponds to the historical geographic occupants of groups of genetic, ethnic, and linguistic differences, the Yoruba in the Bight of Benin and Isan and Igbo in the Bight of Bafara. We consider current Atlantic African population to be suitable proxies for past population in African given limited migration and current population structure following a latitudinal gradient. We combine regions of Europe participation, or excuse me, Europe participating in the transatlantic slave trade by broad historical descriptors and population structure, which are largely described by geographic proximity. All right, so here's the graph right here. So this deals with the millions. All right, so I think what so this embarkation. I'm trying to. All right, can't y'all see that? I hope y'all can see that a little bit better. So this is disembarkment and embarkments. So embarkment means coming from, disembarkment going to. All right. So according to this map, as you can see, the little light blue shaded color is the United States. So it's like 0.4 millions, right? So that's what, 4 million Africans. And then the British Caribbean, which is this color right here, that's 2.6 million. And Latin Caribbean, which is 1.6 million, right? And Central Mexico, that is 0.5 million, right? That's 5 million, I think. Yeah. Let's see, North South America, right over here. And then go down to Central South America, which is right up in here. Okay, 4.9 million. And Cape Verde. All right. Hold on. Oops. Here we go. So you can see that there's a lot of African population in South America and Latin and Caribbean countries. Okay. All right. So, and then over here where it says Africa, it shows you the region which the Africans were brought from. So where this is like the orange color, a lot of them came from Central West Africa, West Central Africa, right? And then where you see the purple color, a lot of them came from the Bight of Biafra over here in this region. No, the second highest is Bight of Benin, and then the Bight of Biafra. Then the third highest is the Gold Coast. Now today the Gold Coast is known as Ghana. All right. All right. So as you can see, Sierra Leone 0.3. I guess that probably means like 300,000. Senegambia 0.8 million. That's probably like what? Well, 0.8. That's what, around 800,000. Yeah. But the vast majority of Africans came up out the Bay of Benin and the Bay of Biafra in West Central Africa area. and the Gold Coast. Okay, that's where majority of the African population came from. All right, so let's go further down. All right, so it says the arrows highlight the general direction of the triangular trade routes between continents during the transatlantic slave trade. Pie charts indicate the document number of the enslaved people embarking out of regions of Africa, 12.5 million total, and disembarking in regions of the Americas, 10.5 million total. Between 1515 and 1865, representative of regions of the Americas and Europe indicate that have they each have four grandparents born within the same country or United States. So representative of the Atlantic Africa either indicate the four grandparents born within or historical ties to a country. Points indicate the 16,000 unique grandparental geo coordinates provided by participants. Cape Verde is an Atlantic African island country that is in 15th century was colonized by the Portuguese and inhabited primarily by the enslaved people from Senegal. All right. All right, so let's go down to where it says the voyage records. So it says we access transatlantic historical records from the slave voyage database. The slave voyage database contains a collection of records from a wide range of published and archival information on more than 36,000 voyages across the Atlantic between 1492 and the early 19th century. The data contains more than 100 possible variables for each voyage, including voyage dates, disembarkation slash embarkation ports, crew information, and voyage outcomes. Some records that lack pertinent data were inputted using information such as carrying capacity of vessels and characteristics of similar documents voyage. Using the slave voyages database, we compile estimates of enslaved African embarkation. Okay, and deep disembarkation, proportion of males and proportion of children for each Atlantic Africans and American region. By voyage year, for disembarkation estimates of enslaved Africans into the Americas, we map the principal port of disembarkation and or principal region of disembarkation to the American region and group by Atlantic African region. We estimated the shipment sex bias using the voyage percentage males on the field and shipment age bias using the voyage percentage children on the field. We similarly utilize the intra-American slave trade database, which contains records of voyages within regions of the Americas that occurred in tandem with the transatlantic slave trade. We aggregated estimates of the number of enslaved people forcibly deported between regions of the Americas using the inputted total inputted principal place of purchase and inputted principal place of slave landing field. All right. So let me click on this. All right, so now here's the result. So the genetic connection compared to historical documents, the overall correlation between embarkation counts from Africa and means proportion of identity by descent shared between regions of Atlantic Africa and all of Americas is highly significant. However, when we subset shipping records to specific disembarkation regions of the Americas, right, IBD and slave disembarkation were not significantly correlated across all regions of the America. For example, the study cohorts representing the United States and North and South America have very little IBD with Senegambia compared to the proportion of captives from Senegambia disembarking in those two regions. Many regions also demonstrate overrepresentation of IBD with the bites of Biafra and Benin compared to historical documents. And so here's the chart here. Okay. Trying to let me this out. All right, so here's the chart. As you can see, the chart shows the total of embarkation and the disembarkation into the region. All right. Let me go back and show y'all the image. All right, so here's the image right here. So according to the research, right, this shows the number of the embarkation and disembarkation. All right, so this is the disembarkation over here, and this is the embarkation. All right, and so this is how you show scientific research when it comes to deal with one's genetic and ancestry. This is how you go into details. You see deportation out of Africa from records. So therefore, we know that the information correlates to African history. We know that the information pretty much validates our ancestry, our ancestral background as far as like our historical information, right? So you got to understand that science validates history and history validates science. So if history cannot validate, I mean, if science cannot validate history, then the historical information is just pretty much outdated or it's not significant. It's not valuable. So that historical information has to validate the science. And based on this research, right, scientific research, it's shown that there is the correlation between those who are in the Afro Caribbean, African American, and Afro Latino, right? They're scientifically proven that yes, the transatlantic slave trade took place. Yes, this is the group of people that were taken up out of the land of Africa and brought into the Americas. So you have to be able to show that correlation. You can sit up here and try to debunk science all you want to, but if you don't have anything to validate your claims, then your information could be considered as pseudo. Just saying. Let me see what y'all talking about. Let me see. So somebody put these weirdo FBA angry making videos happy black immigrants being deported. You know, those individuals are ignorant minded. So when you deal with the ignorant minded individuals, right, that goes along with jumping on a bandwagon of a person that is not going to give them any type of platform or any type of outlet or try to create some type of infrastructure for the community, they'll say things, they'll echo. So what I call is echo chambers. I call that cosplay. So you echoing what somebody else is saying, right? You echoing what how somebody else feel. If you know there's one particular individual that's doing that right now, if you go on his channel, you will see that he's echoing almost everything Tariq Nasheed is saying. And that's what you got. So people are riding the wave, right? People are jumping on the bandwagon because it's popular. They're looking at it as being trendy. They're not looking at it as genetics. They're not looking at it as historical information. They're looking at it as trends. So it's no different than somebody jumping on the bandwagon of being a Hebrew or more, or being so-called indigenous, all of these different things. So you got some FBA saying that slave ships are fake, saying how they store food, water, do sanitation on that long journey. Because those people are ignorant. Again, they don't know. They living in modern times. So they would not know what these people had to endure. But I can give you an example as far as like food is concerned, right? At one point in time, the Africans, what they'll do is the African women, they used to put rice into their daughter's hair and braid their hair up. So when they was on their journey, right, in case they got hungry, they can just take the plaits out their hair. They could unravel their braids or whatnot, take their braids down and then get the rice out of there and start eating if they're hungry. So that's what they did. So these people, some had a means to survive, and then there's those who died along the way. Okay. Now we don't exactly know how everything was taking place as far as the ship goes, right? But we do know that there was a ship that was happening from that was taking place from Europe to Africa, from Africa to the Americas. We do know that, but we can't sit here and make an argument say that uh, the slave ships did not bring African people here. If you study the history about the Cotita was one of the last ships that came here to America. So what you're dealing with, brother, is those who are ignorant minded and they don't know any better. And at this point, you have to ignore those individuals. Some people just want attention. Some people just want to feel entertained. So you have to ignore those individuals. That's what you gotta do. You gotta ignore those people. Because those individuals are not going to change the way they think. They're not going to change their attitude. They're not going to do none of that. All right, so let's go further down. All right, so it says the variation in African ancestry across the Americas. Our estimation of African ancestry with 23andMe ancestry inference algorithm indicate that mean sub-Saharan African ancestry in Americas with um let me see, with greater than 5% African ancestry was highest in the British Caribbean, right? Which is 76% to like maybe 20.3%. All right, the United States was 71%, 71.3%. The Guyanas was 59.7%, and Cape Verde was 45.5%. Mean sub-Saharan African ancestry was lower in Latin America. Latin Caribbean is 19.9%. Central South Africa was 13.7%. South America was 11.9%. Okay. And the Central America plus Mexico was 8.9%. These proportion also corresponded with the proportion of African haplogroups in each region. All right, as you can see here. And you can see down here in the South, if you notice, they show the southern states, right, have the most highest, which is 70 to 95%, 95 to 100%, right? And then right over here in the Caribbean islands and Latin America, 95 to 100%. Okay. So as you can see, most of it is Nigerian ancestry. Then coastal West Africa. Then you got the Congolese Senegambia. All right. And it says within 23andMe's ancestry composition hierarchy, there are four local ancestry corresponding to the region in Atlantic Africa, Nigeria, Senegambia, Guinea, Guinea-Bissau, coastal West African, which is Sierra Leone, Ghana, the Ivory Coast, right, but it's written in French, Liberia, and Congolese, which is Angola, Democratic Republic of the Congo. Ancestry inference in the Americas revealed that the majority of individuals within the United States is 93%, as well as from the British and the French Caribbeans, 82% tend to have ancestry from all four of these Atlantic African population, with Nigerian being the most common of the four. Right, a proportion of the individuals from Guyana's 64% in the Latin Caribbean, which is 44%, also have ancestry from all four population, with coastal West African ancestry in the Guyanas being most common relative to other Atlantic African ancestry, and Senegambia being most common in the Latin Caribbean. The plurality of Mexicans, which is at 47%, and Central American individuals have only Senegambian ancestry, whereas 32% of the individuals from Northern South America have both Senegambian and Nigerian ancestry. Right. In Central South America, the plurality of 31% of individuals have only Congolese ancestry. All right, so you can see the numbers down here. And so see, going down to where it says discussion, right? Overall concordance with historical documents. We found that overall genetic evidence of Atlantic African ancestry across the Americas is consistent with historical documents of the transatlantic shipping of enslaved Africans. The expectation that more embarkation out of Africa corresponds with more ancestral connection to the Americas is borne out by the comparison between IBD and the number of captives deported from each African region. For example, the highest proportion of IBD is found between West Central Africa and the Americas. The consistent with the highest proportion of enslaved embarkation from this slave trading region. West Central Africa also experienced the largest proportion of deportation in the mid 1800s, consistent with our finding that people of African descent in the Americas share the most common recent ancestors with people from West Central Africa. The number, the mean number of IBD connection between regions of the Americas and Africa also support embarkation estimates from voyage records. The majority of enslaved people arriving in the Latin America were generally deported from one or two slave trading regions, whereas enslaved people arriving in the United States and British Caribbean were taken from all regions of Atlantic Africa. Consequently, individuals from Latin America tend to have IBD with two or three African regions, whereas individuals from the United States and the Caribbean tend to have genetic connection to five or six regions. All right. And then let's go down to here. It says potential inconsistencies with historical documents. Now, I want to let you guys know it's not easy gathering up these information. It takes a long time. It may take years to do research on genetics. Okay. You have to be very diligent when it comes to studying genetic information. Okay. It's not something that's just going to happen overnight. And then there's a lot more information that still have to be discovered regarding to the transatlantic slave trade alone. And this is what I mean. If you're going to talk about slavery, right, you have to go back to the origin. You have to go back to the root. You cannot just talk about slavery just in the United States. You got to go back to the root and you got to bring science into the picture. If you do not bring science into the picture and you do not go back in the roots, then you might as well not even have a conversation about slavery. Because science, this is where science is very important when it comes to dealing with the historical information. You got to go back to the origin, and it's going to take a while to do so. It's going to take a while because it's a lot of information, and then there's some information that may not ever be recovered. There might be some information you'll never find out because it done got lost somewhere. We don't know what happened to the documents. So you only deal with what you have. So there's some information that would not ever be recovered regarding to how or who the names of the individuals that were brought here into his land. So for those who study genealogy, if you notice that you may not find out who your other ancestors, as far as like where they came from, what they name were, and what age, etc. You may not find out all that information. Okay. So again, DNA tests only been around for about what, a little over 35 years. Okay. So DNA test is still kind of relatively new per se, but it only been around for about 35 years. But I can guarantee you in the future there's going to be more discovery. Yeah, I can guarantee you that there's going to be more discoveries when it comes to studying genetics. All right, let me check out the comments. All right, shout out to you, Tiff. I hope you have a great Valentine. Okay, let me see. Brother Chief Kamar. Ooh, uh-oh. Brother Kamara, I'm gonna go ahead and send you the link. All right, so I'm gonna let you go ahead and speak for a little bit. So if the brother wanna come on there, I'ma let him come on. So I'm waiting for him to come through. So while I'm waiting on somebody to come in, there's somebody that wanna come in. I'm gonna go ahead and continue with the article. Mhm. All right, so let's go down. And it says documented intra-American voyage indicates that the vast majority of enslaved people were transported from the British Caribbean to other parts of America. Let me read that one more time for the people in the back that may not understand. The documents intra-American voyage indicates that the vast majority of enslaved people were transported from the British Caribbean to the other parts of the Americas, presumably to maintain the slave economy as transatlantic slave trading was increasingly prohibited. These voyages would spread African ancestry coming in the British Caribbean, in the British Caribbean to other regions of the Americas that were not in direct trade with specific regions of Africa. In Latin America, transatlantic slave trading voyages virtually ceased between 1660 and 1780, yet a large proportion of all documented captives continued to be transported throughout the early 1800s to Latin America, primarily from the British Caribbean. And what else? If we go down here, we'll see that it also says that in the United States, nearly 10% of the total enslaved population arrived via intra-America trading with the British Caribbean. Consequently, IBD between the United States and the British Caribbean, primarily the Bahamas, British Windward, and Leeward Islands, is high. Therefore, embarkation out of Africa and IBD between Africa and all the Americas is correlated, whereas disembarkation in specific region of the Americas, IBD, with Africa are not consistently correlated because of the asymmetric transportation of enslaved people within the Americas. All right. So let me see if I can get the brother on here. Let's see something. Okay. So I'm guessing. All right, so maybe he's not coming on. But yes, you guys cannot sit here and denounce the root. If you're gonna denounce your roots, right, it's just like you denouncing your own parents. Because at the end of the day, your parents are still your parents, right? Whether you have a relationship with them or not. So it's the same way when we talk about the concept of slavery, right? Not just in the Americas, but throughout various parts of the land. You have to go back to the origin of the roots. This is why science is so important. And there's people walking around here saying that, oh, this is the white man science, etc., etc. You don't have just white people that study research, right? You don't have white people that's just doing genetics. But because they play a dominant role in science, it's easy to say that. But you cannot ignore the information that is being presented. So whether you feel like it's the white man's science or not, because and I can understand why you're saying it because we live in a Western culture. So it makes a lot of sense that you say that hey, this is the white man's science because we're in a Western society. I get it. But you cannot ignore the information that is valid, that is truthful, right? You can't ignore the facts. So unless you have done scientific research that can disprove or discredit the sources that has been presented, you really have no argument. You really can't say what took place and what did not take place. You got to have scientific information to back up your claim, to support your claim. And it's very dangerous to follow certain individuals, right? Because certain people have agendas that their followers don't even know about. Some people have the agendas to take advantage of others because they see it as a money grab. They see it as an opportunity. And when you deal with a group of people who are not well studied in scientific research or don't even really read as much as they should, then it's so easy to come along and make up narratives and information to bring about control over their psychology. And now they're falling into it because it sounds good. They're going by the rhetoric instead of, well, where did this source come from? Where did the information come from? They're not questioning the credential of that individual. They're just going by the rhetoric of that person. That's what they're going by. So we gotta be careful. I want to present one more thing, and I'm finna go ahead and wrap it up. So I'm going to show the correlation between certain Caribbean countries, right, and how their relationship is with African Americans. So I have done it before. I have shown the relationship between those from Barbados and South Carolina, those from Miami and Florida. I mean, no, those from the Bahamas and Miami, Florida. All right. So let's look at the relationship between the Haitian people and those in Louisiana. Okay. So let's get into the relationship between the Haitians and the Louisiana Creole people, right? So it says a linguistic and cultural comparison, right, from post-colonial texts. So this came out in 2005, but watch this. It said it has been claimed that refuge of Haitian Revolution imported the Creole language spoken in Louisiana to the colony during the first decade of the 19th century. These more than 7,000 speakers of Saint Dominique Creole probably did impact Louisiana Creole, but there is evidence to show that a Creole language exists in Louisiana prior to its flood immigration. Louisiana Creole has existed as a stable au- autonomous language since the late 18th century, but rather is indigenous to Louisiana or development out of a pre-existing pidgin or Creole brought from Africa or the Caribbean has been a subject of debate. Okay. So if I could turn my tongue like that, the Creole language of Pointe Coupe Parish, Louisiana, by Thomas A. Klinger. All right. So it goes on to say the Haitian Creole or Creole has over 8.5 million speakers. More people speak it than any other Creole language. It is the native language of all Haitian born and raised in Haiti, but because centuries of social unrest have forced Haitians from their island home, there are many speakers of Haitian Creole beyond the country's border. Haitian Creole boasts speakers in the United States, Canada, Venezuela, French, Guyana, and the Dominican Republic, Martinique, Guadeloupe, and the Bahamas, etc. So, unlike Haitian Creole, Louisiana Creole has not expanded beyond its original area of growth. The region in which the language is spoken has, in fact, shrunk. Originally, Louisiana Creole was spoken across a wide area as far north as, was it, Natchez, Louisiana, as far as east as Mobile, Alabama. I didn't know the people in Mobile, Alabama ever spoke Creole, possibly even extended to Pensacola, Florida. Today, the language is limited to three geographic locations: section of the Mississippi Valley known as the German Coast and the Acadian Coast between Baton Rouge and New Orleans. The areas around False River in Pointe Coupe Parish, Louisiana, and in an extensive area which of the I don't know how you say this, but I'm gonna skip it. Anyways, the river basin along the banks of the Baute. There are also pockets of speaker along the north shore of Lake Potacharian and in La Fouche Parish. According to the 1990 census, there were 6,310 speakers of Creole French in Louisiana. All right, so both Haitian Creole and Louisiana Creole are products of French colonial expansion and the practice of plantation slavery. The French were present on the island of Hispaniola, the island currently the location of Haiti in the west and the Dominican Republic in the east, since 1629. In 1697, they officially occupied the western half of the island, then known as Saint Dominique, and took charge of the slave trade. Between 1740 and 1791, there were approximately a half a million slaves working on the plantation in Saint Dominique. Haitian Creole emerged as the enslaved Africans tried to communicate with their French masters. Most of the Saint Dominique slaves were speakers of the Congo languages, which are several hundred languages spoken in the sub-Saharan Africa from the Atlantic to Sudan, and they were exposed to non-standard and non-homogeneous French varieties spoken by the colonies. Standardization of the French language had not been achieved during the time of colonial expansion. Thus, the French colonists spoke varieties known as uh, Francois Regional, which contained the attempt to learn Francois regional. Hence, the Creole contains considerable morphological and syntactic influence from their indigenous West African languages. One factor influencing the unusual growth of this Creole was its development on an island in relative isolation from other languages. Probably the most significant factor that led the Haitian Creole to develop and flourish beyond the plantation slavery era, unlike Many similar Creoles in the Americas was the Haitian Revolution. In the early 19th century, ousting the French colonial rule from the island, the descendant of the slaves who developed Creole, Haitian Creole, have nourished the language into a rural government full linguistic system. All right. It says the French arrived in Louisiana in the early 18th century, 100 years later than they had arrived in Hispaniola between 1719 and 1743. 5,500 Africans were brought to Louisiana. In the first decade of slave trade, the Africans were speakers of many different languages, including Iwe, Yoruba, and Bantu. Two-thirds of the slaves brought to the Louisiana originated in the Senegambia region. Speaking Surrey, Wolof, Pular, and Malinke, the largest group from Senegambia was the Bambara, who spoke mutually intelligible dialects of Medinkin. The fact that the majority of Louisiana slaves came from one region was unusual during the plutocracy, since it was considered prudent to separate people of similar tribes and language groups in order to prevent uprising. Such precaution was not taken in this case because it was difficult to get any slaves in Louisiana. Also, the monopoly held by the Company of Indies in both Senegal and Louisiana may also have contributed to the Africans' relative, hold on, yeah, the African relative ancestral homogeneity. Because of this homogeneity, retention of the African's indigenous language may have delayed the development of a Creole in Louisiana. In fact, the Porte Coupe slave revolt in 1731 was organized by the Bambara, who were purportedly speaking their ancestral languages to plant the coup. Ultimately, Louisiana Creole did develop the hold on, Louisiana Creole did develop like Haitian Creole with West African languages becoming the substrates to a very French lexifier. Noted French Creole scholar Margaret Marshall suggests the varieties of French that impacted the Louisiana slaves likely had two that influence had two influences: a maritime French spoken by the sailors of the slave ships, and the colonial French marked by a range of ability in its speakers that included the well educated as well as criminals and rejects of French society with little or no education whatsoever. So it seems highly likely that this maritime French also influenced other French lessifier pidgins and Creoles during the slave trade era. There are a few social historical events that have led to today's diminished Louisiana Creole presence. The transfer of the Louisiana colony to Spain in 1762 had little linguistic effect on Louisiana Creole because few Spanish speakers actually came to the colony. But the transfer underscored what a burden the colony had become for the French. Another event was the arrival of between 2,600 and 3,000 Acadian exiles who had been expelled from Nova Scotia by the British. Lastly, though the French reacquired the colony, Napoleon sold it to the United States in 1803, reiterated the burdensomeness. This act evangelized the Louisiana territory, signaling a centuries long death knell for Louisiana Creole that may well end in the next few decades. Hmm. So let's look at the Pointe Coupe slave revolt. So I'm just curious about this. Hmm. Let's look up. Hmm. Hmm. All right, hold on. Hold up. Go down here. So, Puente Coupe slave conspiracy of 1795. The Puente Coupe slave conspiracy of 1795 was an attempt slave rebellion which took place in Spanish Louisiana in 1795. It has attracted a lot of attention and been the subject of much historical research. It's preceded by the Puente Coupe slave conspiracy of 1791. Hmm. And goes on to say on May 4th of 1795, 57 enslaved people and three local white men were put on trial in modern day Pointe Coupe Parish after an attempt slave conspiracy in the vicinity of the Pointe Coupe military post. Planters found a copy of Victor de Marable the Elders, Thierry de Lepo, which include the Declaration of the Rights of Men of Man and the Citizen of 1789 in one cabin. The trial ended with 23 of enslaved people being hanged, their corpses decapitated, and their heads posted along the road. 31 more were sentenced to flogging and hard labor. All three white men were deported with two sentenced to 6 years forced labor in Havana. That's interesting. So let's look at the other one, the Pointe Coupe slave conspiracy of 1791. I wonder, was this after the Haitian Revolution? Let me look it up. All right. So on June 25th of 1791, a group of enslaved Mina gathered on the estate of the widow Robillard in New Roads, Pointe Coupe Parish. Jean Louis, who was enslaved there, organized a regular balls for Mina men. During the gathering, a plan was made for the Mina to rise up and free themselves, gathering pickaxes, knives, and other weapons to mount an attack on a storekeeper who could be raided for guns, gunpowder shot, and other weapons. The only two, the only two non-Mina people involved were Caesar from Jamaica, ethnically and Ashanti, and Pedro Chamba, who was ethnically Chamba, but had been raised by the Mina. Hmm. Wow. The conspirators planned to launch the attack on the night of July the 7th of 1791, but poor weather and the need to gather Mina from other plantation in Pointe Coupe delayed the uprising until July 9th. With the delay, Jacko attempted to enlist additional supporters, including an enslaved man named Decay. Decay was hesitant to join the conspiracy and confided in Venus, who, like him, was Ado, not Mina. Venus did not trust the Mina and reported the plans to her slaveholder. Hmm. Okay. Venus did not trust the Mina and reported the plans to her slaveholder, Georges Alavo, who in turn passed word to an officer of the local militia. The militia posted guards on roads throughout the area and dispatched troops to capture the conspirators. In total, 17 enslaved men, including Jacko, were arrested and sent to New Orleans for trial. Their trial began in March of 1792, but the Spanish colonial officials lacked interpreters necessary for the witnesses and defendants who spoke only French or Creole. By June of 1794, 16 of the conspirators, one had drowned himself before reaching New Orleans, were returned to the plantation where they were enslaved. In reaction to the attempted revolt, Governor Corondele, Corondé or Corondele, yeah, Corondele ordered slaveholders to control people in bondage in a more humane manner, as well as to provide better food and clothing. However, these efforts were not enough to avoid the Pointe Coupe slave conspiracy of 1795. All right. I wonder where is this located at. So Pointe Coupe Parish is a parish located in the U.S. state of Louisiana. The parish seat is New Roads. Hmm. That's interesting. I never knew that. Okay. Oh, here he is. All right. Let me bring the brother up here. Peace, brother. How you doing? Peace. How you doing? Brother Kamara. Brother Kamara. Hello. So I'm waiting on the brother. Brother Kamara, could you please mute your mic? Mm-mm-mm. Chief Kamara, can't you unmute your mic? All right, hold on. All right, so I'm waiting for the brother to come in, so he want to say something. And but yes, so that's the comparison between the Haitian and Louisiana people, right? Um, of course, the ancestry come from Central West Africa, and they both speak a Creole language, right? Because of the French influence. Yeah. So I'm waiting for somebody to come in. All right. But okay. Oh, here you go. All right, brother. You ready? Brother, unmute your mic. Brother Kamara, unmute your mic. Hmm. Okay. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on, but let me see. Maybe you're gonna have to go back out and try it again because your mic is not unmuted. Okay, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on here. All right. All right. So I don't know what's going on. But just want to give y'all some book recommendation. The Gift of Black Folk, The Negroes in the Making of America by W.E.B. Du Bois. Okay. And I want to share something with y'all. All right, so I want to share something from Marcus Garvey, right? Now, although Marcus Garvey and Du Bois did not have all the answer, but they had enough information to know about where we came from as a people. So if you guys don't get a chance, get this book by Garvey. It's called The Wise Mind of Marcus Garvey. Brother, go ahead, unmute your mic. All right then, brother. How you doing?
Hey, I'm good, sister. How are you?
I'm doing just fine.
Good. Can you hear me? You hear me good?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I guess the phone is different. I'm using it on my laptop when I get on StreamYard because I got my podcast tomorrow, so I don't use the phone.
Okay.
So I'm just
Okay.
listening to you teach that lesson, because they trying to say that we didn't come here on the transatlantic slave trade, and a lot of people saying, we were already here. And I grant there were some Africans that did sell to America here, but I don't think we bought the millions enough for them to meet the needs of the tobacco industry or the cotton industry. So they had to import slaves. In that case, they would have brought them in. And there's no records or none of the slaves ever saying that they were already indigenous here. No one says that. You got Gustav Vasas or Lada Iquiano, you got Prince Abdul Rahman, you got Phyllis Wheatley, you got several Africans who attest that they came through the transatlantic slave trade. And they give you the testimonies of what the transatlantic slave trade was like. Gustav Vasas or Lada Iquiano gives a great testimony of that. So that's just to connect us with Africa. So my topic tomorrow is going to be if you don't love Africa, then you hate yourself. You got a problem with Africa, you got a problem with yourself, and that's self hatred for Africa and the denigrating of Africa is in the very fiber of America. It's what America was created off of, America was based off of, and that is hatred for Africa. So we as African people have to accept our own and be our African self. You are not Sitting Bull, you're not Hiawatha, you're not a pretendian. You are a African. Whether you could like it or hate it or whatever you don't want to do, you can't get away from your Africanity. And that is the problem I think I see here with all these movements such as FBA and other movements. They just want to disconnect from Africa. Disconnected from Africa is disconnected from yourself. You won't have no success denying your ancestry. So you need to know that. So I'm glad you break it down the different things about the plantation, the transatlantic slave trade, slave ships. Like so we don't, there's no record of no. There's nobody say, yeah, man, I was Hiawatha. I was Sitting Bull. You know what I'm saying? You know, there's no record saying that. And the rights are there. The rights are there. There's lots and lots of rights of African people who were enslaved who talk about their African ancestry. You know what I'm saying? Like Phyllis Wheatley was from Senegal. Olada Iquiano was from Nigeria, and Phyllis Wheatley. I mean, not Phyllis, I'm saying Abdul Rahman was from Guinea. You know, he was a Fula. So there are, like I said, there are no records of what they say that we were Native Americans. Every black person wanted to be. I'm Indian. I'm Cherokee now. Them damn Cherokees are the ones that I would call the five civilized tribes who enslaved our people. Cherokee, I think Seminoles. You know, Seminoles did, eventually accept us in their society, but the Choctaw, all over the five civilized tribes who owned slaves. So you're not a pretending, you know.
Facts, facts, and I totally agree. I just want to read something that Garvey said in his book, The Wise
Uh,
Mind Marcus Garvey. It says
uh-huh.
everybody knows that there is absolutely no difference between the Native African, the American, and West Indian Negroes, and that we are descended from one common family stock. It is only a matter of accident that we have been divided and kept apart for over 300 years. But it is felt that when the same time has come for us to get back together, we shall do so in the spirit of brotherly love. And any Negro who expects that he will be assisted here, there, or anywhere by the Universal Negro Improvement Association to exercise a haughty superiority over the fellows of his own race make a tremendous mistake. And
Right,
such
right,
men had better remain where they are and not attempt to become in any way interest in the higher development of Africa.
right.
Hmm.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I mean, so that's evident. And see, the amalgamation.
Brother,
We were able
your
to.
mic, your mic.
Oh, okay, you hear me now?
Yeah, I can
You
hear
hear me
you.
now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah. So the amalgamation of us as Africans here in America uh, made us have to come together because you had different groups on the plantation. You had, Fulani and I think maybe some Europe all together and look out for each other. So we understood our way. This so-called melting pot of African, we're the ones that can play a great role our liberation. You know what I'm saying? So because we became one. You couldn't get on no tribal stuff when you was on a plantation and the white man got his foot on your neck. And so now we could be the ones that be instrumental, black man, American instrumental in Africa, us in the diaspora with Africa, because like I said, we had to be one. Same thing in the Caribbean and West Indies, but they kept more of them in the same, they kept some of them together. We know Haiti had people from Guinea. When the Haitians talk Spanish, they call you Guinea. That duty book there Guinea. Uh, they call
Brother, your mic, your mic.
okay. Can you hear me now? Can you hear
It's
me
still
now?
making. Yeah, I can hear you. Okay. So as the brother fixing his mic, so yeah,
You hear me now?
basically, yeah, I can hear you now. I can hear you.
Yeah, yeah. I said Duty Bookmine was from Guinea,
Uh
and
huh.
so Guinea, and so in Haiti they say your Guinea is your ancestors. So we know we had Europe because they when they got ready to beat Napoleon, they fought them on the Ogun festival. So we know they were mixed together, and so that's the beauty of it. So when you can bring Europe and Mandinka and Fula and Susu and Igbo and some of the Lingala the Congo together, all as one family, that that's the completion of Africa on its complete rise. And so we have to. You can't have a Africa that's healed, you see, until the black man in America wakes up, because we were took from Africa. And Africa fell because of our being taken from Africa, us being manipulated from Africa. And now it's going to take us to unite and stand up and recognize our Africanity and wake it up and settle on those scores, and Africa will rise once the black man in America realize he's an African.
Facts, absolutely facts, facts, and I agree. Yeah, I mean, it's gonna take a lot of research. It's gonna take a lot of studies, and it's gonna take a lot of traveling.
Yeah,
Go to different places, to learn about the ancestral roots and like what our ancestors have done and how they contribute to
that's right.
the societies.
I'm the first crown Mansa that was born in America. I was crowned in June as Mansa K. And you all heard
Oh,
of
that's
Mansa
great.
Musa. Yeah, Mansa Musa. I was the first one crowned. And we formed Mali Kilibife, which is the Mali Empire of the West here in America, to unite the Africans here to come together, to come back to Mali, to support, Mali, Burkina Faso, Nigeria, to support our brothers there. So that's very important. It's very important, you know, that we get back to that. So again, like I say, man, it's gonna take us. But if we deny Africa, and what these FBA people are doing, deny it and don't stand up, Africa will not be complete, and you will not be complete. What you want? You want your
Absolutely.
slave masters culture. You don't speak none of your native. If you say you were here indigenous here, what language did you speak? What kind of clothes did you wear? You do what
Exactly.
master do. You wear
Right.
master clothes, eat
Right.
master food, drink master's drink, and you call that culture? No, there's no culture without. You don't have Africa that's amalgamated with some things you have uh, developed here. You don't have a culture. You just imitating white folk. You're a black white man.
Well, I mean, we have been conditioned to do so, right?
Oh, no doubt. Conditioned to think that conditioned to really you've been made to hate Africa. What did Malcolm say? Who taught you to hate yourself? Who taught
Exactly.
you to hate yourself from the top of your head to the soles of your feet? You know what I'm
Correct.
saying? White supremacy did that, and that allowed them to thrive when we don't, want to embrace who we are. When you got a black man can sit there and make mockery of African culture and talk about people eating bushmeat, that's a sick black man. That's a sociopathic, narcissistic black man who hates who hates his people, but loves the master's trinkets, loves the
Oh yeah.
master's clothes, loves the master's food. He don't want to recognize who he is, and then trying to lead everybody else astray to follow him, to denounce who he is and what he is. You know.
Facts. 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 I strongly agree. Well, I appreciate you, brother. I'm about to go ahead and close it out, but I thank you for
Okay,
coming
all
up
right.
here and
Well,
spreading
thank
the
you,
word.
sister.
All right.
All
You
right.
take it
Thank
easy. You have
everybody
a
for listening. What did you think about? I saw you made a video about. You saw how they did that Caribbean brother, man. How that brother disrespected him and all that. You see how dangerous it's getting by us teaching
oh
that. It's
yeah.
the same tactics that Hitler used in Mein Kampf. He taught you want to villainize African and Caribbean people. It was a travesty. It was disrespectful, and they were encouraging him. They should have beat the man up and hurt the man. That's what they were encouraging him. The man had a sign. The sign was just to my white supremacy. But I don't care what the sign said. You have no right to put your hands on no brother or no
Exactly.
or no sister. Now the Mexicans, you got Mexicans call niggas all day long. Why you didn't do nothing to the Mexicans? You know why? The Mexicans would have put a hot one up in you. They're gonna
Oh
defend
yeah,
themselves. The Mexican ain't say I'm a foundational brown American. The Mexican say I'm Mexican. And he's born here, but he supports his Mexican brother in Mexico. They don't look at themselves as different people. They still united.
exactly, exactly, exactly. Yep.
All right,
Eh,
thank you,
eh,
sister.
all right, thank you for being on here, and I hope
All
you have a
right, no
wonderful
doubt.
night. All right, peace. All right, and I hope you guys have a wonderful evening or whatever your time zone may be. But I'm gonna go ahead and close it out. Thank you guys for tuning in. For those of you who are just watching, you have to watch the video from the very beginning to see what the subject is about, what I'm talking about. So basically, I'm just dealing with articles, deal with scientific sources of information to pretty much back up or validate the claims about our ancestry here in America, right? And how it traces back to the African origin. So if we get out more and more information, right, I think more and more people will become accustomed to it. This is why we need to advocate for science, technology, engineering, mathematics. We need to advocate for those four things. We need to advocate for literacy. We need to advocate for psychology, sociology, anthropology. We need to advocate for ecology. We need to advocate for financial literacy, political science. We need those things. We need to incorporate those things, home economics. You know what I mean? We need to understand the cultural values of ourselves. These things are very important. But I'm gonna go ahead and log off. You all have a wonderful evening or you have a good day wherever you are in the world. Thank you for tuning in, watching. Until next time, peace.